Welcome back to day 2 of the Prelude and VTF Security Bootcamp. I hope you didn't have too much trouble getting the Prelude CLI set up. It is, if you're not used to CLIs, there are some learning curves to get over. Hopefully that wasn't so bad. If you're unable to get the CLI set up, please create a support ticket and a VTF volunteer will help you get it running. You'll need it for the take-home exercise at the end of today. So that one is important to get set up. Today, I will start by going into more detail about the company culture at Prelude, what we look for when we're recruiting, and how we operate as a fully remote company. From there, I will build on the offensive security we talked about yesterday and relate it to the defensive blue team side of security. The blue team tends to be the most relevant when starting a career in IT or cybersecurity. Reason for that, there's more jobs, more opportunities. It's a larger ratio of the security team. I will show you another demo of Detect and explain how you can use it to continuously test security postures at your organization, even on your home computer or home lab if you have one, which I do recommend if you don't have a home lab, in order to test a lot of the offensive and defensive trends and methodologies that we're talking about in this session. I would advise having a robust test lab that contains at minimum a virtual environment for Windows and a virtual environment for Linux. We'll end today with another take-home exercise focusing on Detect and capabilities of open source technology and how you can scale up your security testing. Yesterday, we talked a little bit about the Prelude mission and why it is what we do. Today, I want to talk about who we are, who we're looking for, and how we all work together across multiple countries and time zones. We're a team focused on delivering the mission of increasing the reach, frequency, and usage of advanced security for all organizations. Our priority is building out the right team. In order to do that, we look for specific traits when hiring, and we work to develop these traits in all of our team members. Close to the middle thinking involves understanding what's actually happening, taking a complex problem and devising a simple solution. You can think of this as first principle thinking. You have to understand all the complexity because even the smallest of items can make a big difference. We call this everything matters. Everything matters when it comes to building both good products and a solid company. It matters in part because we are a team that takes pride in our work, takes ownership of the projects we work on. We try to have a culture, a company culture of excellence in how we portray ourselves, how we approach the work problems, and then excellence in technical solutions. We work in a security industry that changes every day. And as we discussed yesterday, a relentless curiosity is needed to stay on top of it. The last two get a lot of focus from VTF, and for good reason. We optimize for serving our mission, not from a place of personal gain. This means helping people over sounding smart and being humble enough to admit when you don't have the answers. In other words, it's okay to say, I don't know. The security industry can be uncharted at times, so we approach ambiguity with a positive mindset. It doesn't matter how smart you are or how good you are at your job if no one can stand working with you. Our company culture extends to the recruiting, where we work to identify potential candidates. We look for excellence. We look to develop excellence internally, working hard, understanding how to approach things in a positive way, looking to understand the base building blocks, the fundamental core areas that make a problem difficult to solve, and then the ability to tackle that, to be persistent through that, to really care about the impact of what you're working on. These are characteristics that we look for and we strive for internally. In addition to looking for people that fit our company culture, we look for people who are creative and can think outside of the box to come up with innovative solutions due to their deep understanding of the specialty. We look for people who are passionate and curious about the security industry. We also look for candidates who can think quickly and handle multiple tasks at once, especially in our early stages. As a startup, especially as a security startup, we all wear multiple hats. There's no strictly software engineers or security engineers. We kind of mix and we rotate, and learning how to juggle and have different skill sets all at once is not just helpful, but in demand and necessary at a startup like us. Finally, we look for candidates who are team players and have a positive attitude. Recruiting candidates that fit our company culture is especially important because we are fully remote. We have people in Canada. We have people in the United States. We have different time zones in play. I'm in Washington, D.C., others are on the West Coast. And all of these things, all these are friction points or challenges that require our teams to operate in asynchronous ways that involve trust and integrity in how we operate on a daily basis. At Prelude, we operate as a fully remote company to enable the team to work from wherever they choose and increase our pool of potential employees. We use a variety of communication tools to ensure that everyone is able to stay connected no matter where they're located. We generally use Slack for day-to-day communication, a lot of text messaging and instant messaging, and Zoom for video conferencing. We use Google Docs to store and collaborate on documents, and we use GitHub for source code repositories and version control. We also use GitHub and Jira for task management as we run weekly virtual team meetings, basically our sprints, where we plan out every task that we're working on that week and the priorities as a way to stay up to date on the company progress and discuss any issues that might pop up. We have virtual and in-person team building events a few times a year to ensure that everyone feels connected and part of the team. Call these offsites. We try to get as many people in one location so we can meet each other and actually spend physical time together. Finally, we make sure to provide our team with the necessary tools and resources to ensure their success, with an equipment budget for all employees and weekly learning sessions on the technical side. Every week, the technical team gets together and attempts to learn something new. We do book clubs, we do structured classes together, we do a lot of collaborative sessions. One of my favorite tools for these is called Safari Books Online, which is a software as a service offering that allows you access to video courses and most technical books that are published. If you do have any interest in our open positions, check out our job page. The most accessible of our job opportunities is being a Prelude intern. Wasim, who will be around to answer questions during office hours today, joined our team as a security intern and is actually now a full-time security engineer while he's finishing his college degree. We've run internships for different positions. We most recently hired a DevOps intern to work alongside our infrastructure team, deployments, observability, infrastructure as code, those sort of topics. Keep an eye on our open jobs page for new internship opportunities. Since Wasim is around today, I would advise shooting him some messages in the chat, getting an understanding of how he kind of got onboarded as an intern, what his experience was, pros and the cons. Ask him what the hard things were or what he struggled with. Feel free to poke any questions his way. Well, that's enough about who we are for today. Let's get into the meat of the lesson. Today, we'll be talking about blue teaming, the defensive side of cybersecurity. We will revisit what blue teaming is, as well as red and purple teaming. Then we will go over how blue teaming has evolved over the decades. That will bring us to how blue teaming is done today and the disadvantages that plague the security industry. Let's get started. Blue teaming is a form of defensive security that involves monitoring and defending against malicious actors. Blue teaming is used by an organization to identify and respond to security threats, as well as to detect and prevent potential attacks. The goal of blue teaming is to identify, detect, respond, prevent, and mitigate potential attacks before they can be exploited. Blue teaming is typically done through a combination of monitoring, logging, and incident response processes. It is important for organizations to have a well-defined blue teaming strategy in place in order to protect their systems from malicious actors. Now, if you think of blue teaming a little bit more, out of the book definition wise, you can think of bare bones, fully automated blue teaming as I bought an antivirus program or an EDR. I installed that on my computer. That's blue teaming, completely hands off. It's not enough to prevent, obviously, attacks from sophisticated threat actors, but you could call that your baseline fundamental blue teaming. Now, as you increment up in your capabilities and sophistication, you have the things like instant response. How do I handle an incident that occurs? Well, that's a whole realm of blue teaming. How do I have eyes and observability on the logs of all of the events that are occurring on a system? Well, that's part of blue teaming. Everything that falls under that detection and response category, you could call defensive blue teaming actions. As we said yesterday, red teaming is a form of offensive security that involves simulating malicious attackers or other goal-oriented objectives to test an organization's security defenses. Red teaming is often used by organizations to test defenses against potential attacks and to find weaknesses in their security posture. The goal of red teaming is to find and exploit security vulnerabilities before malicious actors can. Red teaming is essentially the devil's advocate, prodding the defensive team for ways that the security posture is lacking by asking questions in the form of attacks. As we learned yesterday, questions are rules that you can implement with tests. Purple teaming is used by organizations to find and address security weaknesses in a coordinated way. The goal of purple teaming is to identify and address security weaknesses in a proactive manner before they can be exploited. Purple teaming, as we said yesterday, kind of exploded in 2015. It kind of became its own industry, if you will. You have to know both the language that the red teams use and the blue teams use in order to reconcile and translate between those two teams. Now, speaking just about blue teaming, that part of the industry really evolved along the technology it exists. I like to think of blue teaming is best understood through the decades to understand what technologies were coming into the forefront, to understand how people and companies attempted to protect them. So this whole process has led to a huge number of security products, often overlapping features. It has also led to a security environment where even with all these layers, there's no certainty when it comes to what is actually protected. For the next couple of slides, we'll see how the security industry evolved on the left and a sample of the growing security stack of a hypothetical company. I'm sure most of you have heard of antivirus before. Early antivirus software used signature-based detection. Malware files would have known hashes, MD5, SHA-1, SHA-256, mathematical algorithms that determine a unique identifier for every file. These hashes, the antivirus would look for these hashes and prevent any that contain a known malicious identifier and prevent them from downloading or existing on the disk. So if you take any given file, you could reduce it down to a 40 character, even less hash. That identifier would tell you if that file was a malicious file or a probably benign, not malicious file. And all an antivirus needs to do is say any file that matches this list of known malicious hashes, delete it from the disk or don't allow it to write it in the first place. That's the most basic form of antivirus. This has always been pretty easy to bypass, especially in recent years, because you can simply change the hash in the virus to evade the defense. How do you change the hash? You change a single character, including white space, inside the malware in order to get a different file hash. Because of how easy it is to make variants, call that a variant, change a character, that's a variant. It's basically impossible for an antivirus to keep up because they won't be able to know every iteration and permutation of a particular piece of malware. Defenses needed to operate at a larger scale. They needed to operate at a larger scale, both to combat the expanding number of viruses and variations, but also due to the emerging popularity of the internet. An intrusion detection system, often heard of as IDS, popular examples include systems like Snort, was a popular early choice for a security product that went beyond matching signatures. Instead of being signature-based, intrusion detection systems looked at behavior and heuristics to flag potential security threats. Simply put, it detects intrusions. IDS would look at the network traffic, and it would say, if we notice a signature that has processes that do X, filter it and call it malicious. This was an attempt at introducing behaviors into the detection stack. So not just if A equals A, call it malware, file hash checking, but look at the actual network PCAPs, if you will, network traffic going from a host or inside of a host, and try to determine within the network what is malicious based on what are called filtered signatures. Now, these systems were expensive due to the computing power required, as well as how different setup could be environment to environment. Lots of false positives can come when you're looking at an IDS. Anytime you're taking a large data set like a PCAP and network traffic and trying to identify that needle in a haystack, that one malicious event within it, you're going to end up overcatching. Now, people needed a way to reduce their computing costs because you need to compute and calculate on every single network event. And they needed to increase the amount of data they're able to process. Reduce costs, increase the amount of data. Now, this kind of leads us into the 2000s. So the cloud came along. The cloud offered the ability for organizations to not be required to buy the infrastructure, required to do all this computing, but still be able to scale up as they need to. Security was often built into the cloud. So instead of relying on your own security team and tools, you could rely on Amazon or Microsoft instead. However, defenses were still outmatched by attackers. The 2010s provided more tools to try and help defenders protect their organizations. The bulk of this was done through the outsourcing of system administration work due to AI, automation, specialized companies coming along with further movement towards cloud. Security orchestration, DevOps, automation, and response also added to help parse the huge amounts of logs and data being generated. I like to think of the 2010s and the technology that really started to explode here, things like Splunk on the analytics side, Datadog on the observability side, Elasticsearch really came to the forefront. Lots of different technologies started coming in. The SIM space and source spaces took off. All of this technology came in with the concept of saying, give us all of the data, all of the IDS data, all of the antivirus data, all of the EDR data that is coming in from all of these endpoints, and just create a big data lake out of it, send all the data in. That's really what happened in the 2010s. And then the problem just shifted to, how can we have our blue and defensive team parse that amount of data? That became the problem set. That's really where defenders and defense really started to centralize. It isn't so much on the collection of the data as it used to be before the 2010s, which was the problem. And now it's more on the analysis of mass amounts of data. So organizations since this time have been adding to these products to their security stack without a good way to verify that they actually work. Number of years ago, probably around 2015 or 2016, I spent a large amount of time going around to different Fortune 500 companies, understanding their security stack in order to red team them. I would go in and I would run a security test over the course of a couple of days, and I would determine what's working, what's not working. What I learned through that process, I did this for a few dozen companies, was that the average company I worked with had about 24, 25 security products. These are things they bought on an annual basis. Things like a SIM, things like an EDR or an AV, ransomware protection. Excuse me. These protections often overlapped. And some of them worked, some of them didn't. Some worked sometimes under certain circumstances. Others just flat out never worked. Now, this splay or variety of tools what I kind of came to the conclusion of was that this variety of tools was purchased in order to basically be an insurance policy for the company. They weren't sure if any of the tools worked, so they overbought. By buying 25 often overlapping tools, you're able to play the odds better. Hopefully one works and protects you, right? If you can't validate that any work, then buy as many as you can. Now, one of the interesting things is since that time period, I'm starting to see most organizations have 70 to 80 tools purchased every year. So we basically tripled or quadrupled the number just in the last several years alone. This is concerning to me because every product that we buy and put on our computers in order to validate security slows a computer down, takes more agent resources or system resources. It adds bloat. And it also introduces more security vulnerabilities. Every piece of software that you introduce on a computer, server, or laptop, or phone is another piece of surface area that you need to be considerate around. You need to patch, you need to upgrade. The fewer things that you can have in totality, the safer you're going to be. So how do you actually know if your AV, your IDS, your EDR is actually working unless they either stop entirely or you fall victim to one of the attacks out there? That's really the biggest problem. How do you know? That's why this year we launched Prelude Detect in order to ask questions of the security tools that have existed for decades. Detect was designed to provide certainty as to how well defenses are actually working and to fit with how organizations currently handle security. With the way blue teaming is currently done, the simplicity of Detect can help with many tasks. This is needed because of the huge number of tasks that can fall to a blue team. Blue teams monitor networks and systems for suspicious activity and logging any anomalous behaviors that occur. They establish alerting protocols for suspicious activity and responding to alerts quickly and appropriately. Lots of false positives, again, that these teams need to be aware of. They also establish who needs to be alerted and when for different types of incidents. Analysis sheds light on the sources of suspicious activity, which IP addresses, FQDNs, or as they're called, indicators of compromise. And it helps determine the appropriate steps to take in order to mitigate the threat. Remediation involves taking steps to fix any identified threats, patching systems, changing passwords, disabling accounts, setting up new security controls. Documentation helps accurate records of any security incidents, including steps taken to respond and mitigate the threats. This helps in similar future situations and for passing along institutional knowledge. Documentation is key. It's often overlooked. I heavily recommend learning how to document and write well. One of the skills that I've seen really dissipate in recent years is the ability to write well. Now, people write in more what I'd call text message format, very casual, which doesn't hold over well or is not sustainable for good technical documentation. So if there's one skill, hard skill that I would recommend most technical people work on, it's the ability to write. Since the number one weakness in most systems is people, blue teams are often responsible for training employees to recognize and respond appropriately to any suspicious activity like phishing emails. However, there are many issues with how blue teaming is currently done. The main disadvantage of the current blue team technology or process is that most organizations don't have a dedicated security team that can handle all of these different pieces. It's very expensive. It's very difficult. It's extremely difficult for a small 1 or 2 person IT team to handle monitoring, alerting, analysis, remediation, documentation, and security training. It's difficult because these IT teams are already handling so much, including asset management, endpoint protection, logging, schedule patching, vulnerability scanning, and everything else that IT teams have to do to keep an organization running smoothly. They lack the resources to do all of it. This lack of resources is at the core of why security testing is difficult to scale. Blue team tools can be complex, expensive. They can make it difficult or impossible for smaller organizations to purchase or use them. The vast array of tools available can be difficult to manage, as each tool requires its own configuration and maintenance. A lot of blue team tools require subject matter experts to be hired onto your team just to manage the tool itself. This complexity also makes it difficult to interpret the results of blue team security tests. This makes it hard to draw meaningful insights. Additionally, many of the tools used for blue teaming are not designed to run in production environments, making it difficult to accurately measure the security of production systems. Finally, as we stated before, most organizations don't have a dedicated security team that can handle all of these pieces. That's the key thing. A lot of blue teaming tools and technologies are designed for enterprises. Only large companies have access to them. Now, the concepts that we're learning yesterday and today around offensive security, and now defensive security, revolve around open source, accessibility, transparency. These in nature allow anybody and everybody to be involved in the security of an organization. That should be your goal. How can you make the tooling that you use or develop accessible? At Prelude, we saw these difficulties in Built Detect in order to make it easy to scale security testing across a large number of production endpoints. That's the end of the keynote for today. We will now move on to today's demo of Prelude Detect and get you up and running with it. Again, I hope that you have your CLI either set up yesterday or are in progress of setting that up, have progress setting that up today. You'll need that for the exercise. A lot of offensive work, a lot of defensive work occurs on the CLI itself. So learning how a CLI works and getting comfortable with that from an environment is definitely an important part of the puzzle. So good luck.